So if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know I talk a lot about detachment. And the reason I do is because detachment is a very important skill that you need to have if you are in relationship with anybody that's difficult. Detachment means that you simply can continue to choose to live your life in spite of what someone else is doing. You continue to make your own choices. You continue to be responsible for yourself. You continue to work on your goals, to do what you are going to do. You don't take on other people's moods, other people's blame, other people's anger, other people's projections, other people's, uh, you know, whatever it is. You don't take it on. It doesn't become yours and stop you from living. You see it as belonging to that person because it does belong to that person. So the thing I want to talk to you about today is detaching from crises that come up in a person's life who is making irresponsible decisions and getting in trouble, which is what we fear as we look at the decisions that aren't good. We fear the DUI, we fear the accident, we fear the job loss, we fear losing the house, we fear the money not being in the checking account to buy the food, to do all that. We fear finding out that the person has been doing something illegal, whatever the fear is, whatever you can look at the person's behavior and know, oh, this could happen. So when the crisis happens and Al-Anon tells you, don't create the crisis, okay, and don't solve the crisis. So you're not going to purposefully create the crisis. Most of the time, you're not going to be the one that calls the police and lets them know that the person is driving under the influence. I've been told by them that they're not going to stop a car unless they actually see it. But if you create the crisis, the person can turn around and blame you for the problem. They're going to say, you did this, right? You did this to me. This is not my doing. You're mean. You're awful. You destroyed me. It's your fault. And then you're going to feel responsible because you're going to feel like, oh, I did create the crisis. So most of the time we step back and we allow the crisis to happen, as it will eventually, because cause and effect, people continue to do things that are wrong. At some point, it catches up to them. Some point, people find out. At some point, the reality hits. So when the crisis happens, it is still a shock. It's still difficult. I mean, I've heard really funny stories of people who go out there and they fix the crisis, like go meet the spouse who has gotten into the accident under the influence of alcohol or drugs and says, hurry, get over here, sit in this driver's seat. You be the one that takes the blame for the accident because I don't want it to be me because I'm drinking. Then I'm going to get a DUI. And people who have literally ran down there, sat in the driver's seat and said, yes, it was me. Okay, that's really not good, right? So that is preventing the crisis, preventing the person from experiencing the consequences of their bad choices. We don't want it because it's going to affect us. That person, if you're married to him or her, is going to have to pay fines. It's going to lose the driver's license. It's going to create all kinds of extra problems. You're going to have to decide how you're going to deal with in terms of helping or not helping. But you don't want to prevent the crisis. So when the crisis happens, as much as possible, you want to allow the person to experience the consequences on his or her own. So you don't go sit behind the driver's seat. You don't claim you were driving, right? But then when the person gets the fines, you don't give the person the money. You don't bail the person out. You don't start driving the person around by changing your schedule, adjusting your work schedule, leaving at your lunchtime. In other words, you don't want to bear the stress and the inconvenience of doing this. Now, it doesn't mean you can't occasionally drive somebody somewhere, but to just say, because this happened to you, I'm now going to turn my life upside down to bail you out is a really bad idea. So I always said, if there's anybody in my circle that ends up in jail from a DUI or anything else and wants me to bail them out, I'm not bailing you. I'm not going to go run down there and bail you out. I'm not going to prevent you from having to experience that. And I wouldn't, absolutely wouldn't. So, and that's not easy all the time, but no matter what the crisis is, now sometimes the crisis will hit you in a way too. If you're going to lose your house, if you're going to have your electricity shut off, I mean, you can always decide what part of this is not possible. I can't allow this part to happen. I need to do this because maybe your person isn't making the payments on the house. And so instead of letting the house go into foreclosure, maybe what you're going to do is you're going to say, that's it. Boundary, I'm taking over the finances and you've got to be off the account if you want me to keep living with you. I'm not going to live in this fear that bills aren't getting paid and that money that I'm making is getting wasted on things that are not going for the household. So that could be the consequence, that one more time the house payment wasn't made and now you're taking the money, you're taking over the money. And this person doesn't get credit cards anymore, or just gets a small spending allowance, even if that's your spouse, even if that's your husband, and that goes against what you think is the way it should be. Another crisis could be if there's, a kid that's caught with drugs in their car, or has a problem at school. It's like, okay, there's all kinds of things that can happen. Maybe the kid ends up gets kicked out of a class, has to take summer school, and has to take the bus to take summer school or ride the bike. You don't change your schedule to drive that kid back and forth to school to take summer school when that kid got kicked out of that class. Same thing with college. You don't have to pay for the classes that weren't done. So, but some of the crises are big. An accident, somebody is in a car accident, and yeah, is that going to affect your life? Yeah, but as much as possible, you want to let the consequences fall on that person. Don't jump in and fix and bail them out and adjust so that all of it falls on you. There are some that you can't avoid. And unfortunately, that's part of being in a close relationship with another human being, that our lives are intertwined, especially if it's financial or if it's in a marriage, to where if that person has consequences that involve job loss or the loss of money, yes, that affects you, but you want to make it hit that person as much as possible, not punitively, because it's not yours to penalize, but natural consequences that come out of that, natural consequences that come out of crises. That's called hitting a bottom. Hitting a bottom meaning life gets tough enough that finally it is no longer worth it to do what the person has been doing. This could be the same thing in a marriage. If you are in a marriage and there's been a lot of mistreatment, there's a lot of, whatever it is, abuse, neglect, manipulation, just emotional abandonment, whatever that is, if you reach a point where you're just like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, I am really, really done, that's a crisis, right? It's a crisis. And you don't have to prevent that crisis from happening just so the person doesn't have negative effects, no matter if that affects the person's reputation, the person's job, whatever that is. If this is the natural progression of the consequences of what has been going on in the marriage, not addressed, not changed, then the crisis needs to hit, even if that affects the person's work, even if it affects a person's relationships with the family or with other people or reputation. You don't do it vindictively. That's not your job, not to punish, but the natural consequence. I talked to one woman who was in a marriage, I think, for 30 years, and there just was no intimacy. And because her husband was involved in pornography, and yet he was in a ministry and pretty high up and had a big reputation. And she said, there's nothing more I can do. Nothing has helped. Nothing we have done has made any change at all, no matter how I react, don't react, no matter what I tell him, what he says he's going to get better work on it, he does it. And she said, I can't get any change. There are no more boundaries to set. And I said, yes, there is. There absolutely is. And it's the one you have been avoiding. You let him know that you cannot live like that anymore, that it has gotten to a point where you are either going to require change that lasts through accountability, through therapy, deep therapy, through no matter what it takes. And that will either happen and this may still be an option, you're going to go to the board of the ministry that he works in and speak truth, because that's part of being accountable. And that's part of the fact that this got to the point that it's a crisis, and she truly, in just the depths of her being, cannot do this anymore. And you don't have to suck that up and say, I have to live with that because that's going to hurt this person. No, 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 no. That is part of the consequence of the behavior. You get to be honest. You get to do what you need to do, never punitively, only because that is the right step. That is part of being accountable. That is part of being honest. And there will be no change if you don't let those things happen and allow them and not prevent that natural consequence. And that would be the same thing if you're asking a child to move out of your house, or, whatever any of those things were. So hopefully that helps you, and helping you to literally detach from crises that difficult people bring into your life. So thank you for watching this video on Change My Relationship.